To shift gears a little bit, we find ourselves in the final days of the papacy of Pope Benedict, and I thought maybe a quote of his on the topic of love that you mentioned earlier might be relevant. Anyone who really wanted to get rid of suffering would have to get rid of love before anything else, because there can be no love without suffering, because it always demands an element of self-sacrifice, because given temperamental differences and the drama of situations, it will always bring with it renunciation and pain. So I think perhaps one approach to the question of why is suffering in our world, in some sense, we're different human beings and we have different temperaments, and it's this our attempts to get along with one another and to approach each other in love. Elsewhere he says, it is when we attempt to avoid suffering by withdrawing from anything that might involve hurt, when we try to spare ourselves the effort and pain of pursuing truth, love, and goodness, that we drift into a life of emptiness, into which there may be almost no pain, but the dark sensation of meaninglessness and abandonment is all the greater. And I think that's something that students know very well. There's a lot of hurt out there in the world, a lot of suffering on our campus, I think.
I think that's important that you raise that. And I've noticed in this country you play a game called football. It's a very strange game to someone from Britain. I once sat watching a major league game with a man whose name was up in the Hall of Fame, so he knew what the game was all about, you see. And after an hour or so watching this, he said, "Have you figured it out?" "Oh," I said, "I've figured it out. I can tell you exactly what American football is." He said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a series of prayer meetings interrupted by war." Now you say, what's that got to do with Pope Benedict? The big men that form a football team, do they put up with pain? You sports people. And I hear Rice say, somebody told me you've got a terrific basketball team. Baseball team. The point that's being made here is that in ordinary life, we will calculate sometimes extreme physical pain into going for a high-performance sport. And we know the two things belong together. We don't see anything strange about that. And what Pope Benedict has been saying was said by Dostoevsky long before him. I cannot imagine, wrote Dostoevsky, a truly great person that hasn't suffered. Because suffering does something to you. Now, the trouble with this question is that it always leads to another question. And the other question I appreciate is, I can understand big fellas, and getting tough and the pain they go through. But there's suffering in the world that's utterly disproportionate. And that's my problem. Yes. And that brings me back to the other kinds of arguments. But I think it is very important to recognize. And of course, the scripture, the Bible, has a great deal to say about suffering at all kinds of levels. Paul, the man who brought the message of the gospel to Europe, and because of that I'm sitting here. He got an eye disease and God didn't heal it. He suffered beatings, all kinds of stuff. They didn't earn him salvation, but because he loved God so much, he was prepared to endure the beating, the misrepresentation, the suffering, in order to witness. And as I go into Oxford so often and go along Broad Street and on my bicycle even now, I often stop at the cross in the middle of Broad Street. You know it well. It's opposite your old college at Balliol.
Indeed.
Where Latimer, Ridley and Cranmer were burned at the stake for their faith in God. See, ladies and gentlemen, it's all meaningless if death is the end. And that's why the resurrection of Jesus is so central to all of this, because it blows open the whole closed world that naturalism has given to us.